So how do you get this deal of the Holy Spirit living in you? Well, you obey his commands and you hear him by his life living inside of you. It says this, on that day you will realize that I am in my Father and you are in me and I am in you. Did you notice this verse in chapter 14, verse 20? On that day you'll realize I'm in my Father and you are in me and I am in you. Now there's a lot of in going on in this passage. Did you notice that? Who's in who? You'll notice that Jesus says, I am in you, and the Spirit is in you, and you are in me, and I am in the Father. And because it's a little confusing, I brought some boxes to help us illustrate this. So let's just say, this is you. Get the clue on there? This is you. Okay? This is both the Spirit and Jesus, because the promise in this passage, even by itself, says both. It says the Spirit will live in you, Jesus will live in you, God is inside of you. So he says, you obey my commands and you seek after me, and I will be inside of you. Then you look at this passage on the next level, and it says, you are in me. So I am in you, going backwards, you are in me. So the next level box is Jesus again. Okay, so we've got yet another Jesus box, and you are in Jesus. So where's Jesus? Well, Jesus says, I am in my Father. So we got one more box level here, and this is our Father box, and inside the Father box is Jesus. Now you'll notice at this point, when you're all wrapped together, you are like a little cream center of an Oreo cookie. You got God wrapped on top of you and on bottom of you. He's before you, he's behind you. He's outside of you and he's inside of you, and there's no escaping him. And when you're living with your life inside of God and God's life inside of you, how easy do you think it is to recognize his voice? It's way easier. It's way easier to recognize God's voice. Problem is that oftentimes people will say, I want to live my life relatively independent of God. I'll check in with God once in a while. Maybe I'll, do my duty on Sunday mornings, or once in a while I'll pray a little bit. But the truth is, it's hard to visit God and have him speak to you. If you make your life in God, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, God's voice becomes inescapable and unmistakable in your life. He says, I'll live inside of you, and you make your home in me. This is what life is like when God is in you, above you, behind you, beneath you, in every other direction. It's in this kind of context that St. Augustine said, love God and do what you will. Love God and do what you will. In other words, he's saying, throw yourself headlong into the life of God. Love him with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. And when you do this, it's really, really hard to go wrong. It's hard to go wrong. It is hard to miss God's will when you're so wrapped up in him. I remember one of the biggest decisions I ever made in my life was, should I marry this beautiful young girl named Kelly Schrader? And I sought the Lord hard for this one, because this is a place that you do not want to make a mistake. And so as I went after him, I asked the question, am I obeying God's commands? And to the best of my ability, I was. Is Kelly the kind of girl that would be pleasing to God? She's a godly woman. I thought, man, she's a great woman to be pleasing to God. Am I trying to obey God, do everything that he tells me to do? Because there's more girls out there that are amazing girls that love God. But is this the one that I should marry? And it got to the point where I was so wrapped up in God. And whenever I thought of marrying Kelly, I was overwhelmed with peace and joy and happy thoughts for the future. And I thought, you know what? This seems to be in the middle of God's will. And I trust that if I'm wrapped up in God, he's not going to allow me to make a mistake in this arena. And I went ahead and popped the question, and the rest is blissful history. In addition, the Bible and the Proverbs say, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. It's just another way of saying, wrap yourself up in God, and he will give you the desires of your heart. But this verse has to come with a warning. Because when you delight yourself in the Lord, when you wrap yourself up in him, your desires will change. Your desires will change. And this is not a way to manipulate God. Sometimes people use this proverb in that way. God, I delighted myself in you. Why didn't you give me the Lamborghini? That was the desire of my heart. And what happens is God changes your desires as you become enveloped in him, and he gives you what he wanted for you anyway. It's the best way to hear God's voice, is to wrap yourself up in him.